Sharp's got the intro.
Perfect.
He knows everything.
He does. He knows it.
Let's go.
Episode 24?
Yeah.
I didn't know if it was episode
24?
or podcast 24.
Welcome to episode 24?
Huh?
Ooh.
All right. What else do I say besides welcome to this is episode 24? Welcome to the Misfit podcast. Yay.
Alex Trebek walks out.
Jeopardy.
Cycle 1.
What do I do now? Are you ready? Sure. Hey guys, welcome to episode 24 of the Misfit podcast. We break down Cycle 1 and other exciting stuff that's coming up.
Woo! What kind of exciting stuff?
Yeah, where are we going? I don't know, some camps coming up here in the fall. That's pretty exciting. Get back to Clue, going out west to Seattle, and Texas. So
you make it sound very exciting.
I'm excited.
Wow.
Well, I don't get to go
Me
to
too.
Seattle, but everything else I should be able to get to.
So we have, to button that up a little bit, ladies and gentlemen, we have 3 camps left in 2016. After the CrossFit Games, we will be in Seattle, Washington at CrossFit Amped, August 26th to the 28th. Then we're basically in the exact opposite part of the country in October, back at CrossFit Clue, the 6 majillion square foot magical playland. We're there October 7th through the 9th. And then to kind of complete a good little triangle to get to as many places as we can, we're in Houston, Texas. So that's CrossFit Edo, December 9th to 11th. 3 of our biggest areas, the Northwest, Northeast, and South Central. So get your tickets, misfitgear.com.
2 of the biggest gyms in the country.
Yeah, Edo's really cool. It's a cool spot.
Yes.
And there's tacos. So
Really good tacos.
Right next door.
right next door.
Was it Brothers?
Tacos. Yep. Brothers
Wow.
Taco. Yep.
Cheap and delicious. Okay. So, Gabe, what would you like to talk about today?
I don't think anybody else wants to hear what I want to talk
Well,
about.
I was just trying to
we'll
kind of
talk
lead
about
you
some
in.
Cycle 1.
There you go.
Yayo.
Yeah, so it's
Now I'm
time for
interested.
Cycle 1. I know everybody's been anxious to get grinding on the season. I know a lot of my athletes have been like, "Hey, let's go. Let's make the CrossFit Games." So here we go. Here's the season. We're starting off the season officially with Cycle 1, and I guess from me or for me, this is really we're going to put a full season together. We're going to put a whole training year together. So it's time to really focus and get back to the grind, I guess.
Yeah, so talking about like building a foundation for everything else that we're going to stack on top of it for the rest of the year. To me, Cycle 1 feels like the opportunity to put the right foot forward and take the step into making your season successful. Because not only is it like a physical grind with a lot of more, I guess you could call them slow lifts, even though that's not necessarily true, and a lot of raw conditioning, a lot of bitch work, things like that. It's a mental grind. Interval work is some of the toughest work that you can expect to encounter, and there's a lot of it, and it's every day, and it's mandatory. And putting forth a lot of effort and making those quick changes over 5-6 weeks will happen if you can do that. I'm not so sure everyone can, though. So this is kind of the first step of the season to see, are you actually tough enough to make this, make a run this year in this sport? So that's what I like to look out for.
What are you made of? I mean, when I talk to my athletes going into the cycle, a lot of it's just, it's nothing sexy in this cycle for most of us. It's get back to learning how to move a barbell, squatting, deadlifting, pressing, learning how to get yourself around a barbell and Olympic lifts, and then sitting on machines and running on the road as fast as you can. So a lot of unfun stuff in terms of just like mental grinds, but in terms of making yourself a better athlete, I don't think there's better things we could do this time of year to get ourselves, ready for the next year.
It's all about perception, right? So it's like, is this shitty? I don't want to do it. It's not going to be fun. Or is this an opportunity to reestablish yourself as an athlete? You get that full year. Obviously, so many people were drawn into CrossFit because we take all those single modalities and we put them together and we get the work done quicker, and mentally when you mix stuff together, it becomes a little bit easier. It's not quite as monotonous. We're kind of pulling the rug out from under you in terms of those aspects. But having the perception that this is a real opportunity to build strength base, endurance base, power base, movement base is huge. And if you are humble enough, you can pass a lot of people here in the fall, starting with cycle 1, but you got to do it right. A lot easier said than done.
I think the mental toughness that goes along with being able to sit on a rower or sit on an assault bike and push over and over again, no matter how tired you are, translates later back in the season when we get down to the open. You're like, man, I was able to go at 1,500 calories an hour for 30 calories. Why can't I do it for 10 in the open or whatever the workout is to try to finish this piece to push those last 30 seconds before the buzzer ticks off and you get those extra points. So I think it pays off a long ways.
Well, there's just no place to hide. Like, it's really easy to compare your rowing splits or your running splits or skiing splits or whatever, your back squat numbers against people. You can't blame it because you had a bad day on the muscle ups. You can't blame it because your rope climbs aren't that good, or you can't, you know what I mean? You can't come up with some excuse like you could in the open or another competition, because this is just raw and straightforward. So if you're not willing to kind of put everything out there and really train hard, everyone's gonna notice. You can't hide. So I like that.
It's not like today's piece where you can get away with if you have good muscle ups at the end of the workout where you can beat everybody and surpass everyone there. You don't row hard. You don't.
We're
bike
living in the
fast.
future right now in this podcast, though, so you can't talk about that. Sorry.
That's right. Well, it happened.
Wow.
So
Mind
let's officially start with the most boring part. Seth, what do the warm ups look like in cycle 1?
Well, yeah.
The most fun to write.
The most fun thing for me to prepare for you guys. So I tried to get a little creative with the warm-ups. Typically, we've had our 3 styles that we use for the most part. We have the primer, the rep accumulation, the weakness warm-up. Well, I'm not using weakness warm-ups this cycle because you guys are doing weakness work every day as bitch work. It doesn't make sense for me to put you on a rower for a 2K to test to see how you're feeling when I'm going to make you do intervals later on. It's not going to work that way. So I've decided to take something that we kind of neglect a lot in the sport, but that could come up and could actually be extra help in addition to the accessory stuff that we'll talk about later on. We're going to do a lot of kettlebell stuff in the warm-up. So things like single leg deadlifts, double kettlebell front squats, goblet lateral squats, all things that will help improve our mobility and just help us kind of iron out those positions. We're going to actually have to brace and move with a purpose in the warm-up, even though we preach that all the time. It's not necessarily followed that way. The kettlebells will force you to kind of move through good range of motion and maybe learn some new movements along the way. So we're going to use a lot of kettlebells. We'll see that quite often. You'll see some really basic gymnastics movements mixed in there. And when you see the gymnastics movements, we really want you to do them as perfect as possible. So none of the warm-ups are going to be sprints, very, very few primers, if any at all. We want you to kind of move, again, with a purpose. If it's handstand push-ups, you're going to set up, make sure your hands are perfect, make sure you're nice and straight up and down with the wall, and you do a set of 10 perfectly. If it's just pull-ups, I want you to jump up and do the most perfect, efficient set of butterfly pull-ups that you can, so on and so forth. So it's just about kind of, like everything else is about rebuilding the cycle, so is that. We're just going to kind of pay attention to the movements and work through some pretty decent range of motion to get warmed up before we do a lot of the heavy lifting and interval work. So that's it. There's nothing sexy or fancy about it. It is what it is. Again, as always, if you have something to add above and beyond this that helps you as an individual athlete, by all means add it. These are just suggestions to make sure that you're not diving right into a heavy back squat or diving right into some bitch work without actually moving through some solid range of motion first. So,
Diving right into bitch work, that sounds terrible.
a lot of people do it. They just don't want to think about it. And I feel like when you do that, you give away your first 2 intervals of not really getting anywhere.
See, I think if we were like doing just straight up like, row a 2K for your bitch work today, I could jump into that. But like if it was 500 over and over again, no thanks.
But what if you warmed up really well and your body was flushing everything efficiently and then you jumped into your 2K? Don't you think you could shave 5 to 8 seconds off it if you were already...
Maybe, I don't know. Like I
Yes.
said, I've
Yes,
absolutely.
Probably
The answer
right.
is yes, coach.
I was trying to lead you down the right path.
I mean,
So
Sometimes he struggles with not knowing whether he's a coach or an athlete. He's still living in the twilight zone of that.
true.
Gabe finally gave up.
good for him.
Gabe finally gave up.
Good for
but,
him.
What's funny is
big
now
fella
I'm beating
over
him
here.
more
Oh,
often, though.
shit.
So.
Wow.
Mental.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That happened today.
Yeah. Oh man, this is just going to turn into these two going back and forth.
It's gonna get ugly.
All right.
Cool.
So most days we typically lift after the warm-ups. Most days. Drew, why don't you get into the strength and Oli stuff we can expect this cycle because it's pretty significant.
Yes. So this is the time of year where we are trying to build a really strong base of power and strength that then translates to the movements that you're going to do more often in CrossFit. And you guys already know what these are. Most of you have been doing this for a few years now. To anybody new, it's back squat, strict press, bench press, deadlift. They are nicknamed the slower lifts, but if you've listened to anything we've done before, if you lift slow, it's pointless. But the strength work and the Olympic lifting work are meant to create a certain type of athlete in cycle 2. So if the strength work with some accessory is meant to create an athlete that has stronger legs, stronger midline, through accessory work and some gymnastics, maybe, some connective tissue that allows you to take a little bit more volume. That side of things is big in the development of Olympic lifts. Anyone knows, you go do a back squat volume cycle and then you PR your snatch and you haven't done that much snatching. On the other side of the coin, we have all of these habits that we're trying to get rid of when it comes to the Olympic lifts, especially for anyone who started CrossFit way back in the day and had to realize that if they kept lifting the way that they weren't going to stay with the pack in any way, shape, or form.
Who's that? Who did that?
All 4 of us.
I still haven't
Everyone?
made any changes.
So what we do with the Olympic lifts is we ask you to take a technique focus. With the ego, with Instagram, with all of these things, it's really hard for people to do. And if you don't do it, you probably won't improve on your Olympic lifts in this cycle. That's your choice. There will be a video that accompanies this podcast that goes in depth on what we're looking for in the cycle, but that still doesn't mean you guys are going to listen to us. We're hoping 9 out of 10 athletes listen to what we say. And then, really when you put those things together, when you put together an efficient athlete and a strong athlete, that's when the Olympic lifts, become something that not only you can rip for a 1-rep max, but our sport, 1-rep max and it doesn't happen that often, but, the same movement 20, 30, 40 times happens a lot. So if you combine movement efficiency, again, with that strength, with that speed, with that connective tissue development, that's when you can do this stuff over and over and over. That's what we're looking for. I will say on the back squat that, you guys get so much work when it comes to leg strength throughout the entire year. There's so many different ways to make your legs stronger. Back squat is so dependent on midline stability, and that's such a huge part of it. And, if you've been to one of the Camp 2.0s or you're planning on attending one, the banana back squat is something that we really don't want in your programming. The front squat and the back squat are 2 different movements. And if you go way back to you guys remember the Glassman videos with Budding in his garage?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
And talking about the midline stabilization and how core strength was basically measured in whether you could draw that line through the guy's pelvis and up through that crazy S that he did for the spine. And if those things didn't move under load, regardless of it's the deadlift or the back squat, I'm sure they used other examples, but that midline stability transfers to your deadlift, which we don't do too often because it'll wreck you. It transfers to your first pull in your snatch and in your clean. It transfers into being able to catch a bar, especially when you're fatigued, when you're putting it overhead. So really, really try to take those examples to heart when you're doing your back squat. And you might have to take a step back. And again, this is an ego thing, oh, my back squat's gone down, but I'm doing it right, and it's translating to all these other movements, but now I can't talk shit, with my friends. So
Damn it.
It's more of we laugh, but it really is more of an issue than you think.
It's a huge issue.
So again, just that mentality, the humility to say cycle 1 is my opportunity to catch Travis and Jordan and Cody and Alexis and all these people. They caught other people in other years. You can do the same thing, but they listened and they took the advice to heart and they really made changes, and it started, it really all starts in cycle 1. So again, you guys know what's coming, but the more important thing for me for this podcast is just to make sure that you guys know what we expect within those movements. So
So let's talk a little bit about, I mean, some people do know what's coming, some people don't. So I would say, for the most part, CrossFitters don't back squat as much as they're going to back squat in this cycle. So what do you think are the things they could focus the most on to make sure that the volume of heavy squatting that often doesn't wreck them, either with their nervous system or with, creaky old knees and ankles and stuff like that? Because once someone has a nagging issue, they start complaining and the things start getting in their head and things change. So how do we kind of make it through that 5 weeks?
So volume-wise, we're going to go back to what we ask all of our athletes to do that we remote coach, and that's just live the lifestyle. If you are, big into partying and you think it's cool that you don't sleep that much and you pound caffeine, it's not going to work. It's not going to go well for you. So just living that lifestyle of caring about your body, caring about recovery work, caring about sleeping. I will say that you can do all of that. You can do it right and still get really beat up from this cycle if you don't go through the ranges of motion on a very regular basis. So if you're squatting 3 times a week, really heavy, 7 days a week, you're moving through those ranges of motion. We've got it in the rest protocol, and there is going to be a new cycle 1 rest day protocol for you guys. We're going to update that each cycle as we move forward. But moving through range of motion with voodoo floss on, spending your time in the mobility WOD, and then after the mobility WOD again, squatting again. Maybe even grabbing a barbell, putting it on your back, and doing some squats with an empty barbell on those rest days, or at least the off squat days, so that you guys keep working through the range of motion, you keep flushing that waist, and you make sure that you don't turn yourself into the person who does the movement, then goes home and does nothing and turns into, the easiest thing would be, bench press guy at the gym. He's stuck in this position because he's pushing himself further and further into a tight pack, and it does the same thing on your ankles and your knees, your hips, basically all joints. So force range of motion on a regular basis. Luckily for us, CrossFit does that a lot. But within cycle 1, not as many Metcons. So you got to kind of make yourself do that a little bit more.
I think it's also important to flush day in and day out, make sure, it's part of the rest day protocol. And we've talked about it in the past, especially around like the open and whatnot, is after you finish your training session, spend 15, 20, 25 minutes on a bike or go for a walk or something just to flush your legs out, because you're going to do the first week of cycle 1 and like, what the hell just happened to me? I thought I was in shape, or I've been training all summer. Why am I feeling the way I am? It's because things are changing. The stimulus is a little bit different. We're now lifting more. We're doing more bitch work. You're going to feel different than you have been going through those both post 1 and post open 1 and 2 cycles. You're going to feel different. So be ready for, kind of a kick in the ass to start and then go from there.
Yeah, and just as important as flushing tissue is getting blood to the joints and the areas around the joints. I just feel like that gets neglected by a lot of athletes pretty often, and I think every one of us has remote clients that have, like I was saying before, that nagging issue that now they start putting that, that left knee in their head or that right shoulder in their head, and when they need to actually put effort forward, they're, whether consciously or subconsciously, holding back. And if that happens early on, the cycle's not going to work that well for you. So just make sure, you're flushing for both tissue and joint reasons, getting blood circulating.
Oh, and holy shit, use your recent percentages. That will ruin that ruins everyone, so many people's cycles. When I was in high school, I back squat 500 to 6 inches above parallel. Now I'm at 315 below parallel. I'm thinking of using the 500 for my 85%. What do you guys think? Yeah, don't do that. You get to max out in test week, use that number. Plain and simple.
What if they just
bomb it?
Yeah, what if they bombed it?
With some clients I do like, let's say a games athlete was coming off the games and they wanted to jump into the squat cycle. We do like a predictive max. You have them lift heavy, but you don't have them go for the max. You have them say, geez, I know that I could add 10, 15 pounds to that.
Yep.
Get to that 90-ish% range, comfortable, like, oh, okay, I can still probably hit 405. That is okay. If you stand up easily with 335 pounds and then you miss 360, making some sort of prediction is okay. Or just backing down and proving to yourself you can hit the rep is also a great idea.
I think a big thing though that's important is making sure that you're not missing reps. And a lot of times when we get into this, when you test and then you go through the first week and it's like, oh yeah, I can handle this. I should have added more. Or, oh, I can predict that my max is going to be a little bit heavier. And then by week 2 it gets holy crap. And then by week 3 you're failing reps and whatever. It all goes back to the what we talked about at the beginning. It's have that humility, bigger picture. Think about this as like, this is setting you up for everything else for the rest of the season. So put that ego aside and make sure you're on the right track.
If it's light, you just squat faster. Isn't that what makes you strong anyway?
Yes.
Absolutely.
So really no
and
excuse.
one thing, I'm looking at Gabe, and it's kind of manifesting in my head. Gabe doesn't have a ton of time to do his training, but Gabe loves a good squat cycle, so I'm pretty sure he's going to be following this cycle.
Oh, yeah.
What is the difference for you when you don't have a bunch of time? You run into the gym, you start back squatting, you can barely finish it, and then the ones where you actually ride the bike a little, maybe hit super hips, and then squat. It's night and day, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So warm
not
up,
even
please.
close.
Let's warm up every time, because people will say, "Oh, I did really well on this squat cycle other than this one day." And it's like, okay, let's go back to that day. What did you do for a warm up? Did you stretch? Were you really tight? Did you grab a lacrosse ball and try to break up this or that? Like, you can almost always find a reason. So,
and that goes
slept
to
1 hour
that
the night before.
that squat session and then everything else leading up. So on the days where I just walk in, some days I actually can hit. It hurts a little bit more, but I just push through it, and I hit what I was supposed to hit, and then the next day I'm like, can't move. How am I supposed to?
Oh, really?
Weird. So,
Yes.
Awesome. Any last thoughts before we get a barrage of questions on the strength? Because it's going to happen anyway, even though you see this.
It's off your 1 rep max. Everything's off your 1 rep max before that gets asked.
And you get, and luckily there aren't many 1 rep maxes that aren't involved with the test week. So if you hit test week, you're good to go. The only thing that's on there that is not is the 1 rep max deadlift. We tend to not do that very often throughout the year, but we're asking you to work up to a heavy set of 3, a heavy set of 4. That's heavy for that day. So you don't need a percentage for that.
Not heavy with your spine looking like a banana either.
Yeah, go watch the Glassman video. It takes him like 3 hours to write like 6 words on the board though, so fast forward a little bit.
All right, so moving on to my favorite part of everything, the WOD.
Do we even do WODs in Cycle 1?
Yes.
Kinda?
I'll just say yes.
Okay.
Even though they're not mandatory most days, because most of you that know how the blog works, you'll have options after your mandatory stuff's done where you can pick 1 or pick 2 depending on the amount of volume we prescribe that day. Your options basically all cycle will either be do a traditional CrossFit style workout or do some accessory work. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's dependent on the athlete completely. But just so you guys know, there's nothing crazy to expect from the WODs. There's no specific focus, whether it's high rep for small sets or, kind of alternating through movements quicker. It's going to be just a varied assortment of what I think are very difficult or very intensity-driven Metcons. For the most part, probably 90% of them are couplets and triplets, really classic stuff that we expect you guys to be able to put, again, just full effort forward. Some are short, some are long, but just really diving into them and hitting them really hard because you're not going to have a lot of them this cycle. So the ones you do hit, you need to put a little extra effort into them. Maybe use a little bit of strategy so that you can maximize and get the most out of each Metcon. But don't game them. Don't skip them all. Don't just cherry pick the ones you like best because you know that they're optional. There are some really tough ones coming up. And when I say tough, I mean they're very doable, which makes them very uncomfortable and tough to complete. So again, nothing super crazy here, nothing out of the ordinary to expect, just good old-fashioned pain. So
I saw a lot of pain in there. Some good pieces coming up in this cycle. I think a lot of the stuff, even though it's not mandatory, is going to be, a good test here and there. Bigger sets of gymnastics, being able to cycle a barbell. I saw some of the weights getting kind of aggressive, which I like. Every once in a while, throwing a heavy squat snatch in a workout, or
2 very doable movements followed by some heavy singles.
Some good tests in there for sure. I really like test week that's coming up.
Test weekend training pieces, which can sometimes be
pennies.
one and the same.
Pennies has come back up.
Yes.
Can't wait.
Oh yeah, you guys will do pennies, middle of the cycle.
I do see that.
Just to see how it goes. But the main focus of conditioning for the cycle, as most of you know, is the bitch work. And what is bitch work for those of you who may be new this year? Bitch work is basically that grind, that uncomfortable, that over and over effort that you want to put, that you have to put into things that you don't want to put into things. So the parts of the Metcons that we just hate, like when someone throws a 500-meter row in the middle of a triplet, and people always dog that sort of thing. Or if they're 400-meter runs in a Metcon and people just kind of dog the run and use it as their recovery. Well, that doesn't really get you better at that stuff. So there's a whole section on the blog, and there's a whole purpose for just doing monostructural work at really high intensity over and over again. And for the majority of the bitch work we'll see the cycle, it will just be that. Intervals of varying lengths, typically 2 minutes or less, or significantly less per interval. So a lot of sprinting with a good amount of rest, either 2, 3, or 4 to 1 rest to work ratio. So you'll be resting a lot more than you're working so that you can bring that intensity each and every interval. I think that's one thing that I'm trying to improve on last year, actually giving more rest this cycle so that people can hit each interval with significant intensity. There is one thing that is different this time of year, and I'm actually going to let Drew explain how this is going to work 1 day a week, long slow.
Yeah, so this is something that we've been kind of bouncing off each other for the last couple of years, not really sure how to implement it. And year after year, running becomes a bigger part with the true form, and then especially at the CrossFit Games is a huge part of his running. So being able to say, like there are with other disciplines in this sport, I used to be a weightlifter, I used to be this, I used to be that, so I'm fine. I used to be a runner, or I'm a good runner. At the highest levels doesn't count anymore. And it's time for us to have you guys put your money where your mouth is if you're a runner. And if you're not, we need to be able to put some stuff in here for you guys to be able to build that base. What we didn't want to do was give you guys run 5K, run 10K, run 7K, whatever it is, and have you just annihilate yourself and your legs and your central nervous system and all this different stuff, and then ask you to do CrossFit, ask you to do back squats, ask you to do this and that. From a scientific standpoint, and this is yet to be proved within the CrossFit community, but it's been proved within the endurance community, is that there is a heart rate zone where you can teach your body to deal with aerobic work better. And it's actually going to be a slight tick back from what you thought it was going to be. And that's why when you look on the blog, you're going to see something like row for 25 minutes at a heart rate of 180 minus your age. Again, it's going to be a little bit slower than you think, but what it's going to do, again, is build that capacity. It's almost like taking yourself way back and thinking about how low your intensity was in certain movements when you started CrossFit, kind of building that base. We really need you guys to buy into this just so that you can prove to yourself that if you work on a weakness like this for 6 to 7 weeks, you can make a big change. And the test is a 10K run?
Yes.
Correct? If we post this video on Monday and you guys don't have to run that till later in the week, sorry for the surprise. But it's a 10K run. It's going to take you anywhere from 40 to 60 minutes, 40 to 70.
Wow.
We'll see.
That's someone who might want to scale. If you're in a 70-minute 10K, we may need to start at a lower level for you. 40 would be a good score. 50 to 55 would be like
upper ranges.
I would say. 60 is pushing it. Anything over 60 is we need to start somewhere else probably.
So with the 10K, no heart rate monitor. You're going out to run a 10K. You're going to learn a little bit about yourself, whether you like running, whether you can pace, whether you can do all of these things. Then we're going to try to teach that and train that for 5 weeks. Then you're heading back out for another 10K, correct? Yes. Yep. So that retest, again, if the work is done right, if you combine building that base of muscle with the lifting and the sprint work that Seth just talked about, and then you go out and you log your miles at this heart rate, you combine these two systems. You combine the heart and the muscle, and you should be able to get yourself there. Now, there are going to be problems with this if your running form is really bad, if you do not have good recovery, if your nutrition is absolute garbage. Like, these things work, again, when you kind of live that lifestyle and this is what you're trying to do. So if you're the type of athlete that is really just kind of trying to maybe do a little bit better in the open and do local competitions, you might want to scale this stuff back a little bit.
Yep.
Or on that point,
but I mean, you do a good job of building them up throughout the cycle after they die on the 10K.
Right.
Right.
Sorry,
but
you're
again,
dead.
That's
I mean, basically, though, if you this is set up to have somebody go and monitor their heart rate through pieces throughout the cycle. If you know you're not going to do that, then skip to 10K and do something else because it's not going to have the same effect, right? I mean, if you're not going to take the time to pay attention to your heart rate and pay,
well, yeah,
and
you're not going to have a
recover.
score because it's not
Right.
going to matter. I mean, your time might be faster on the retest, but you're not going to know why necessarily.
Right. So I guess the effect is.
And I mean,
is
if
kinda-
someone flat out cannot afford one, we will tell you what that heart rate's going to feel like, and you can
Yeah.
try to mimic it, but it's not going to be the same.
Sure.
100%. So,
And one note about that too is something that can really change the way that your heart beats at a certain pace would be the other activities you've either done before, before you go out and do the longer piece. So we want you to try to have a significant gap. And when I say significant, it might only be 20, 30 minutes, but at least a gap between your last conditioning piece and this. And then there's a second warm-up written where you can kind of ramp up really, really slow into a little bit of intensity so that, like we talked about earlier, your body starts to get used to flushing before you go out and run. Because if you go out and run, even if you run at an easy pace at the beginning, it may take you the first 5 minutes for your heart rate to actually settle down to your target. So we don't want you to waste that time that you could be kind of finding that adaptation, or at least we hope. So we want you to kind of ramp up and then come down a little bit and then go into the endurance work, hopefully able to keep your heart rate at a very stable position from the start by ramping up and then letting it rest before you go out. Sort of like a primer, but not exactly the same. And another reason we really want people to give this a real shot, monitor their heart rate and do this, is because the science of exercise is always changing. So even though this is probably the most current information we have on endurance work, it doesn't mean that this is going to be the science that we use 10 years from now or 20 years from now, whatever. Things are always changing. So you guys will actually be part of us keeping track of what times are, how much someone can improve in 5 or 6 weeks, and how this affects a CrossFitter's exercise program as opposed to endurance athlete only exercise program. There is a significant difference. So if you guys can really focus on this and do it correctly and not cheat, again, check your ego. Don't just sprint past somebody because you're running with someone and they can keep their heart rate lower and go faster than you. Don't try to keep up with them. That defeats the entire purpose. Run your own race, keep your heart rate in your target zone, and you'll find improvement over 6 weeks, or at least we think you will. Yeah. And
I can say from the standpoint of someone who does not have an aerobic base, like literally, like if there was a scale of 1 to 1,000,000, I'm 0. So I did this. I tested a lot of this personally and noticed a very big difference in heart rate regulation in conditioning pieces. And I was actually surprised at how far down the energy systems it transferred. So even in the 7-minute range, I was really trying to improve that 20-minute Metcon, but the old science of these pathways don't cross each other and don't work together is asinine.
BS.
Yeah. So again, just to say it one more time, it is a little weird, especially, I did most of mine on the ski erg, and it was a little weird going that slow for that long. You know what I mean? I'm used to we do the 120 beats or less for the recovery days for the 40 minutes, but the, just going a little bit harder doesn't feel that much different. It's not that bad.
I tried it as well. It's weird, but it's just a different piece.
So
Yeah, I just, again, can't stress this enough. Try to actually stay within that target zone. Someone like me who just loves endurance work and would do that every day if it made sense, but it doesn't. I would like to live at 165, 170, maybe even 175 beats per minute, and I'm comfortable there because that's how I like to work out. But again,
then you go to squat the next day.
Yeah, well, it doesn't happen. I mean, I can't squat for shit. So I know that if I wanted to do this, I would have to really have some self-control and rein it in and test it for the next 6 weeks, because my go-to is just run as hard as you can until it's over. And that may have actually limited how successful I could have been in the last couple of years of my pseudo training, whatever you want to call it. My on and off exercise. Yeah.
My exercising.
But who knows? Maybe any day I can just run a 20-minute 5K and without training, because it's just kind of the energy system that I use. But if I started to incorporate this and actually stick to something that was challenging for me to run distance at a low heart rate, who knows what's going to happen. So I'm going to give it a shot too and see what happens. You're an endurance master. What's going on?
I mean, to me, this is actually an old soccer trick. We used to have to do this all the time. The coach was just like, hey, go run for 45 minutes, go run for an hour, hour and a half, whatever. And it was always as a team. You had to stay together. You had to, we knew we were going for a long time, so we know we had to go pretty slow, and we never knew why. And a lot of times we just, be running as a team, chatting, goofing off, whatever. And in this case, I think that what you're going to find is that you're going to be a lot more in tune with your heart rate, with, okay, this is happening, like I've got to control this. Yes, you're going to have a measure, hopefully, but then it translates in. It's kind of like the Ramwat effect, where you're working to stretch and it's uncomfortable, whatever. The mental effect, I guess, of staying calm and kind of controlling.
It's nice to know that you can do that, right? That you do have some control over that.
And so a lot of times when let's say we're going to run a 5K or whatever, I know, like, okay, this is a good pace for me. I don't even have to have like my watch on. It helps, but I know, okay, like I based on my heart rate, I can keep going at this pace and I can still have enough to push later on or whatever, this or that. So it definitely goes a long way. And I think that's a piece that a lot of other people miss on the longer runs, or whatever. So I think you're gonna find a really big benefit.
Yeah, I played with this a little bit last year. Cam and I did at one of our camps. We had to do one of these runs, and you got used to running distance, which was for me the biggest thing for running is being alone with your thoughts is not very fun.
So fun.
There's nothing to stare at. There's no monitor. You're not sitting there. People aren't in the gym. You're out on the road doing your own thing. But through practice and doing this over and over again, it becomes easier. It's no different than, I suck at rowing. How do you get better at rowing? You row. Suck at running. How do you get better at running? Run. So, like you said, there's no place to hide in the cycle. But if you just put your head down and are willing to work in these things that you're not very good at, you'll see, big rewards in a little as 6 weeks.
What are the monitors called? The ones on the rower and the one on the ski erg. Do you know what those are called?
Oh, like the model?
Yeah. I'm just saying, if you guys do have a bunch of disposable income, getting
PM5.
yourself one of the new monitors, is it the PM5?
PM5 is
He
the
would
new
know.
one. Yeah.
The PM5 for the rower is going to be a lot easier staring at that screen than I know a lot of the apps and the watches will beep for you to tell you that you're out of your zone, which is nice. You're not running down the road staring at your iPhone.
Yeah.
So that's something that you could get for the rower again if you have the income, or if you're an affiliate owner and you're trying to use this endurance program
I
to
use
help
the
your
watch.
I have a pretty decent
Cheap
one
and
that was like
works easy.
$40 on Amazon. It works great.
Yeah. I just know that especially with the skier, because you're moving around so much and your hands are they got to be where they got to be. You can't really look at them. Being able to stare just at the monitor makes it really easy.
I think the easiest thing to check the monitor for is if it has the new blue backlight instead of the older like greenish yellow backlight, then you can definitely connect.
And that's the
lights
heart rate
up
monitor would be the Polar, whatever, H6, H8.
Any
something.
Bluetooth monitor will work well.
My Timex one works
Yeah,
too.
anything,
cool.
anything
Awesome.
Bluetooth will work.
Great.
Yeah, I think all we have left is accessory work.
So we are in the process of putting together some templates for you guys for the pro and complete tiers, where you guys could add some weakness work into your cycles, whether that be a squat plan or an accessory plan or an endurance plan. And the first way that we're going to test this out is by giving a version of it to everyone for free. So instead of the normal accessory work, you guys are going to have choices within the accessory work. So you're going to have the choice of doing the accessory work, and then when you choose it, you're going to have to make another choice. What we've done to make it simple in this cycle is it's either going to be gymnastics or close to gymnastics, or kind of a generic strength accessory. You're going to make those choices based on, again, we are trying to personalize it, but we're personalizing it for 15,000 people, however many people. Right. So big guys, little guys, I need to be stronger. I need to move. Gymnastics are still a great strength accessory because, again, they build that connective tissue that makes it okay to squat all the time and okay to do the handstand push-ups all the time and okay to do the pull-ups all the time. Kind of just those little muscles that make it so, it doesn't really matter what your performance is. It matters how you feel the following day. So that's basically what you're going to see. You're going to see a choice on there. We tried in the test week to give you guys some tests to see, how you improved either your midline stability through accessory work and, in squatting, or maybe it's your pulling strength, maybe it's your pushing strength, maybe it's a little bit of gymnastics endurance, that kind of thing. So choose one of those tests each day, and then unless you really feel like you should just be blasting through Metcons every day, which could be a lot of people, give a shot, give the accessory work a shot, and just make sure you're picking what you can actually improve on. So,
and it's not drastically different than accessory stuff we've had in the past. We're just aiming it in specific areas now. So don't think that you have to learn like 50 new like strange movements. It's just it's the same stuff with a specific focus instead of just kind of jumping around from bit to bit. You'll get to pick what works best for you instead of just taking what everybody's doing. So,
and I know that we've already said this and we're going to keep saying it, but you guys are CrossFitters. Please move with serious purpose and intent in the accessory movements. There's no point doing them otherwise. Our favorite is the kipping glute ham raise.
Kipping push-up.
Jeez.
Well, yeah, that's a whole different thing. There are scales to the glute ham raise, different ways to make the lever shorter so that you can get back up. Going all the way out over the pad and then just heaving your body up just doesn't. I mean, if you don't feel it in your hamstrings, it's not a hamstring raise, right? I mean, that's kind of the easiest way to put that. So that's just one example. Make sure that you find some resources within the movement library or our videos or someone else's videos, anyone's videos, and actually know what you're doing before you do the movement.
Yeah.
All right.
Boy, that was a while. How long is that, Ted?
About 50 minutes.
Wow, almost an hour about Cycle 1, guys. I hope that you're paying attention.
We're just pumped up about it. We're getting a new season started. It's fun.
Brand new year.
It is.
I'm going to take a day off between the games and Cycle 1.
One
time.
day. It's all you get.
Yep.
Wow.
I'm going to go to the beach or something. It's going to be crazy.
Whoa.
Anything else to
And
add?
then we
One
get
last
going on
thing.
2017.
What you got?
New shirt dropping on the site. Ted,
Wow.
when's that going to be?
It's dropped,
It's already on the
son.
site.
It's already on the
and
site?
This
Wow.
is,
It's
and this,
dropped,
this is
son.
shot
It's
2
dropped.
weeks in advance, so they'll probably be out of stock by the time this shows up.
Maybe you can get second stock.
Yeah, second stock.
Second stock. I'm waiting
That's
for
the thing,
third
right?
stock.
Third stock.
That's the freshest.
Perfect.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for watching. If you got questions, you can hit us up just about anywhere on social media these days.
Don't forget to comment on the blog, right?
Yes.
New year.
Yes.
Comment on the
Boy.
blog. We want to see who's on there, who's following every single
You
time on
make the
Cycle
programming
1.
better by commenting on the blog.
Sure do.
Hunter Woody might even answer your comments.
He was
your
all over the
questions.
blog. Did you see that this
He must be
morning?
getting
Do you say the
bored.
double underhand suicide deadlift grip? Was that Hunter?
No,
That's
it was
somebody
someone
else. All right.
Jeez. All right. Until next time. So
See
like,
you guys.
subscribe, follow, watch, do all those things,
Tweet.
and then we'll talk to you soon.
Boom.
Thanks.
Roast
See you
guys.
guys.